everyone. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of February and the new moon that we have coming up in Pisces on February the 28th. Now, I'm actually filming this update very early. I'm filming it on the 5th of February because I'm taking an extremely well-deserved rest in a different geography next week, so I'll be minimally online, but I wanted to do this now because I really don't want to have to do this when I'm away. So, and to make sure it gets out and you can hear the update, that's why I'm doing it now. So I am not going to catch anything that happens between now and that potentially quite dramatic full moon in Leo on the 12th of February. And just to remind you of where we're at, on the 30th of January, we had Uranus moving stationary direct. And whenever a planet becomes, particularly an outer planet, moves stationary direct, it magnifies the symbolism. So one of the potentials around that day was aviation issues, and of course we had that really tragic collision between the American Airlines passenger plane and the military helicopter exactly on that day, the 30th of January, and many lives were lost. And I think there were 3 airline incidents on that very day, because it's this kind of, Uranus is the sky god, but also there's a kind of volatility that is in the air too. So since that time, I'm filming it on the 5th, as I say, we've had a whole flurry of solar flares, some really big M-class flares, some almost an X-class flare. We've also had quite a lot of seismic activity, particularly around Greece, around Santorini, a whole spate. And so this is very related to Uranus, both the solar flares, the seismic activity, it's the planet most linked to earthquakes, and also in general unstable geomagnetics. So this is going to continue into the full moon in Leo on the 12th of February. So we may well see, we also saw, by the way, massive a decline briefly in Bitcoin. And so Uranus in Taurus, Taurus is currencies, wealth, markets, stock markets. So we could see any or all of those kinds of things happening. We could see truth coming to light. We could see, again, crypto, stock market volatility, currency, wealth volatility, aviation issues, cyber attacks, power outages, all the things that I talked about in that video, but it is very linked to truth and awakening as well, under the bright light of that full moon. So we'll see what unfolds, but as I say, I'm not taking account in this video of whatever may unfold there. So now I'm going to start talking about this second half of February, and a much more Piscean half, much more, very different energy. On the 18th, the moon moves into Scorpio, a water sign, and we already have Mercury, the Sun, and Saturn and Neptune and the North Node all in Pisces. I'm calling this the Pisces pile-up, because we have so many planets, a very unusual number of planets in Pisces. So on the 20th, we have Mercury square to Jupiter. Jupiter still in Gemini. So this is about big ideas for your future. It can also be about some big news, Gemini. Big news, big information coming out. So see where the sign of Gemini falls in your chart. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below. You can get a 2-part video series, and you can watch those 2 videos to infinity, forever, because it will give a lot more meaning to these updates I do. So if you can find the house area where Gemini falls in your chart, for the year that Jupiter is moving through there is usually a sense of expansion, or greater recognition, or abundance, or even freedom sometimes in that area of life. So that will give more meaning to you personally. So that's on the 20th. We have Jupiter square to Mercury, and it's a really good idea if you're thinking about planning for the future, that is a really positive day to do it, where you'll be able to sit down and really become quite visionary, actually, around your future. However, by the 25th, in fact, it's really the 23rd to the 28th, but specifically exactly on the 25th, Mercury then comes to conjunct Saturn. And whatever those big plans were, this is much more of a reality check to those plans. Now, this may work personally for you. It kind of makes you just much more realistic and pragmatic. You know, what can I actually achieve that isn't just pie in the sky? Or it may be quite sobering in terms of the information that is coming out around kind of Pisces areas of life. So that may be pharmaceutical drugs, it could be the media, it could be Hollywood, lies, deceptions, all of those things. It could be quite sobering, anything that is appearing through the news and the information, Gemini, at that time. On the 24th of the month, we've had quite a long-term transit of Mars moving retrograde. And then finally, on the 24th of February, Mars moves stationary direct at 17 degrees of Cancer. Now, again, the Martian influence will be expanded then. It can be quite emotionally reactive, Mars in Cancer. It can be quite assertive, aggressive, and quite emotionally protective as well. So you may be the one who's triggered to kind of impulsively bite back. So please take a breath before you do that. Be mindful, but it may also that you are feeling more protective of your loved ones, your home, etc. But Mars stays. Mars has been at 17 degrees of Cancer since the 12th of February. It will remain there until the 9th of March. So it isn't that with this change of direction to move direct that it's like firing an arrow or a catapult. It's just that Mars very, very steadily starts to move forward. So see where the sign of Cancer falls in your chart and see what has been happening in terms of, you know, things that have been a bit frustrating. There's been a lot of toing and froing. Things haven't been moving forwards as cleanly and easily as you would have liked. From the 24th of February, they will at least get some clarity and start to move forwards in that area of life. So they're not going to go super speedy, but things are going to become clearer and you can now move forwards. The frustration eases with that Mars direct motion. And then we get into the Pisces new moon. So I am going to show the chart now because there's a fair amount to talk about here. Okay, so again, I set this for England. This is where I live. So ignore the houses, ignore the clock face, just focus on the placements of the planets in the signs and their aspects to each other. So at a new moon, we always have the sun and moon exactly together. The new moon is actually at 9:41 of Pisces. And here we see this huge number, this huge Pisces pileup of Sun, Moon, Saturn, Mercury, North Node, and Neptune. So very, very unusual to have that many planets in Pisces. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, include Mars also in water. We have 6 planets in water at this new moon. Now, firstly, see where this falls in your chart, 9:41 of Pisces. And don't forget to set a new intention for whatever you want to manifest in your life, what new seed you want to plant in that particular area of life. But Pisces is the most sensitive water sign. And so we are likely to be feeling very emotional, very sensitive at this time, very empathetic and sympathetic. And this can manifest in many respects, because the obvious thing for Pisces, because it's to do with the seas and the oceans, is that we see a lot of flooding. And I'm going to come on to the astrocartography later. So we may see a lot of flooding around this time, heavy rain, and it can also manifest in the emotional area as you just feel overwhelmed, you can't cope, you feel confused, you feel ungrounded. There seem to be a lot of lies and deceptions, and you can't see through the fog, you don't know what to think. It's linked to sadness, it's linked to grief, it's linked to a great deal of compassion. And when these extreme situations, wars, extreme weather events happen, it really brings out massive compassion in us across the world. So we may see some reason for that coming up as well. Pisces is linked obviously to water, toxicity, pollution, oil spillage, shipping, fishing, drugs, addictions, those kinds of things. Those are the most kind of difficult expressions of Pisces. But in a very positive way, Pisces is linked to more psychic sensitivity, which I know many of us are feeling. Do keep a dream diary through this period, because Pisces is very, very linked to your dreams, because the veils are thinner when we have a lot of Pisces energy. It's an excellent time to increase your spiritual practice. Pisces spiritual, Saturn practice, your spiritual discipline, and that really, I'd encourage you to do all of this year, because so much is going to be happening. It's linked to unconditional love, to healing, to oneness, to a connection to source, a connection to nature, a connection to the divine, the connection to the ethereal, connection to the elementals. You know, all of that magical realm Pisces is very linked to, and more of us are going to be feeling those links to those ethereal beings that perhaps we haven't been able to connect with before. So this is very beautiful in terms of the transcendent, the magical, the spiritual, the divine. And what is lovely as well is that we still have Neptune conjunct the North Node. Now, it was exactly conjunct on the 7th of February, but it is still exactly conjunct by degree here. And the North Node in a kind of global chart that I'm looking at right now is really about the soul's path of growth. And it's the soul's path of growth for the next 18 months until July 2026 is very much linked to a sense of greater divinity, connection to ancient wisdom, to the earth, I would say, because it's the Virgo-Pisces axis for this nodal axis, and the sacred within the earth. We're really going to remember that. And Pisces is going to be very tuned into that and removing the veils, removing the blocks that have stopped us in that remembrance and that connection. That's super strong right now. The other thing that is very interesting, and really do set a new intention, not only for your own life, for the earth at this time, and a sense of a heightened sense of spirituality. This is the only new moon in Pisces we're going to have this year. So a heightened sense of spirituality and spiritual connection is absolutely right on for this new moon. Now, in addition, thinking of all the watery side of this new moon, we have the dwarf planet Gong Gong. I understand that's pronounced Gong Kun, but it's spelt Gong Gong. And it has a very long orbit, almost the same as Eris, a 551-year orbit, and it's at 5 degrees 35 of Pisces. So it is conjunct this new moon as well. Now, Gong Kun in Chinese, it's a Chinese god of flooding, Chinese god of flooding. And it's very interesting that when it was discovered in July 2007, and remember July, this was the summer season in the Northern Hemisphere, there was a great deal of flooding both in the UK and also in India, literally within a few days of its discovery. in July. I think it was the 17th of July, but it was July 2007. So here we have, again, a suggestion we are going to see a lot of rain, a lot of water, a lot of flooding at this time. It could also be a flood of information, because Jupiter in Gemini, information, media, is squaring this new moon. So we could have a flood of information, an enormous amount, an overwhelming, a confusing amount of information coming out right now. And what reinforces that is that we have Mercury in a very tight sextile to Uranus. Truth, shocking, surprising truth coming to light. That's going to just go on all year. We also have dwarf planet, beautiful dwarf planet Salacia, at almost 10 degrees of Aries, so very tightly conjunct Venus here. Salacia, as you will remember, I've talked about before, she was the wife of Neptune in myth. She's mermaid energy. Alan Clay describes her as higher love consciousness, higher love consciousness. I feel, because she's linked to the shimmering moonlight and sunlight on the sea, that she's very linked to light language. More and more people are suddenly speaking a light language as they shift in their consciousness. But this Pisces new moon has two broad levels of manifestation. On the one level, yes, we can see all of the watery stuff I've talked about here, but we can also see a much higher, a much more spiritual, a much more divine level of unfolding. And because this is really right at the end of February going into March, and March will be, I think, an extraordinary month. It's very strong astrologically, not only because we have the Aries equinox, of course, but we also have Neptune for the first time in 165 years, leaving its ruling sign of Pisces, the sign it rules, and entering Aries on the 30th of March. And there are many other things in March, particularly the second half of March, that I think are extraordinary and spiritually very significant. And I'm actually having a conversation with Nancy Rebecca again on the 14th of March about what she is seeing in March, particularly that second half. And she's not the only one who's seeing that. So it will have a very different manifestation potentially of where we are headed in our evolution, which is now accelerated, as I've spoken before. We also have this ongoing quintile, 165-degree aspect between Mars and Pluto. Now, this can manifest either as individual power, struggling against state power, and feeling very protective, as I say, of those you love and your home and your homeland, or it can manifest as it is better if we align our individual will with divine will. Pluto can also represent divine will. And it's a sense, I think, another aspect of Pisces that we can bring in this Mars-Pluto as well is potentially there's a sense of surrender here. And of course, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you may want to surrender because you're just in complete despair. But it's a different kind of surrender. It's a surrender to the divine flow. A surrender to the divine flow, where divine consciousness wants to take you. And Ann Tucker talked about this recently in one of her angel message updates as well. Mars is also in a trine to Saturn. So whatever, the question is, at this new moon, what are we building for our future? Mercury square Jupiter. What are we building in our future plans? Because this trine between Mars and Saturn will help us build it very strategically, very practically and pragmatically, but within the context of the spiritual. Saturn and everyone being nurtured and cared for, Cancer. So that's where we are going. So this is a very interesting new moon for sure. Now, I'm going to stop sharing here because I just want to really expand on something I've been talking about that I think I could have said a little more clearly. big. This is a very big year, as you know, and the extreme weather, the extreme earth events, the natural and unnatural occurrences are going to continue all of this year. And at times that's going to be quite dramatic. And if we look at the terrible flooding there's been in parts of America, if we look at the extreme fires in California and Los Angeles recently, it is absolutely devastating. The war in Gaza, the other wars we have, we're very familiar with. It is absolutely devastating when you lose everything, when you're terrified and you've lost absolutely everything. And I cannot imagine being in that situation. And our hearts go out to everyone, I think, who's in that really precarious situation. And so we have to honor them. We have to, if we're in that situation, we obviously have to process and honor that grief. And, that's why every night in our meditations, free 15-minute meditations, we are offering love, healing, and solace to all the people caught up in those situations, but also seeing the end result of seeing them back in love and joy and abundance, not enlarging the problem, but envisaging the solution. And that's how it works in the quantum world to bring in the best outcome. So certainly we have those extreme situations, but what I'm going to talk about really is, aside from that, if I'm just talking about more generally, if we are not in those extreme situations, as a general principle of the way we operate in life. Now, Pisces, of all of the signs in the zodiac, is the most malleable. It's mutable water. Some people think it's ether. So there's great malleability in that wonderful conversation I had recently with Dr. David Clements. That's on my YouTube channel, where he was talking about, the waves of living consciousness. And we know this is how it works in the quantum world. Now, as I've already said more than once, this year we are going to have an enormous number of distractions. We're going to have zigzags, look over here, look over there. We're going to have hairpin bends. We're going to have an enormous amount of information coming at us from different points of view. And if we focus on those externally, it's going to be absolutely exhausting because they're going to be coming in at speed. And we just don't know what to think. We're absolutely baffled by it all. And I've frequently, over the recent years, used the term live from the inside out, not the outside in. And that may have seemed to you to be a kind of trite, even, or a glib phrase. So I want to try and expand and explain that a little more, because if we are living from the outside in, the way it works is there's an extreme event or distracting, dramatic event in our external reality, some really big scary thing, yet another really big scary thing. And so that's step one. Then we react to that really big scary thing by going into fear or panic. And so the consequence, step three, of that process of living from the outside in is that it lowers our frequency and creates a very incoherent and disturbed inner state of being. It's not a good place. It's not a good place for your health, your mental health, helping others, any of that. That is the process of living from the outside in. Events that are extreme, that put you into fear or panic or worry or anxiety, create a lower state of being. We are less able to help ourselves, we're less able to help other people. But if we are living from the inside out, and the way this works is, as soon as you wake up in the morning, you stamp the emotion you want to feel through your day on your frequency, on your consciousness. I am going to live in love today. I'm going to live in joy today. I'm going to live in compassion today. I'm going to live in gratitude today, whatever you choose. And then there's a broadcasting, there's a beaming out of that emotion with which you want to dominate your day. And what you will find is that not only do you have less and less dramatic events coming in at you, but even when they do, you are able to buffer them. You're able to send them love. You can use the Hope Fitzgerald infinity wave to kind of smooth the way, to keep in a state of physiological harmony and heart coherence. It's much easier to live in a state of heart coherence and love if you are living from the inside out. It's extremely difficult to do that if you're living from the outside in, because you're just too scattered, you're too buffeted by, what do you think about this scary thing? What do you think about that scary? What do you think about, what do you think about X, Y, Z and whoever's in charge and what leader and what country? And it's going to be absolutely exhausting. We're only at the beginning of February. We've got a long way to go. So I'd strongly recommend to you that you kind of master this, living from the inside out. And it's just a kind of switch, really, of just making the choice, just making the decision each day as you wake up. I am going to live with X, Y, Z, love, joy, gratitude, whatever it is. And bring, post-it notes around your kitchen cupboards, on your fridge, on your bathroom mirror, to remind yourself of what your inner state needs to be. And the effect of each of those is going to have a huge impact on your timeline. And by timeline, I mean your future trajectory going forwards. What is most likely, what is most probable for you to unfold in the coming days and weeks and months. And by the way, obviously you'll impact the collective, because we are never separate from the collective. We're just a drop in the ocean. So really think about that, because you're not just influencing your now. Every thought, every emotion, every choice we make, every decision we make today is changing our tomorrow. So really kind of try and get the mastery of this as much as you are able, because that will serve us very well. We are co-creating, as you know, in every moment. And with so many of these really big, scary things coming in, we think, if we're living from the outside in, that they're really going to happen. Our neighbor grabs our arm and said, have you heard about X, Y, Z? It's really, it's a terrible, terrible, and this is going to happen, and this is the plan, and, this is what's going to happen next week, next month. But so often, they just don't come to fruition. They just don't happen. They get to the, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th hour, and then they kind of fade away. And that's exactly how it works in the quantum world. Because if we give it our attention, that really big scary thing, remember our focus and our attention is energetic food, we are much more likely to make that manifest. We are making manifest what we absolutely fear and don't want. But if we, as I've often referred to, hashtag starve out the scary and loving the good, if we turn our attention to what we do want, something loving, something beautiful, something helpful to help share with people around us or send healing to someone, then that scary timeline just sputters out like a damp sparkler. It never, ever comes to fruition. It's got no energy behind the energy is crumbling anyway in the collective. But we can accelerate that crumbling, that sputtering out with our individual efforts too. And I hope this is helping, because I'm trying to explain it more fully than I think I've done it in the past. But what does manifest is, as an individual, if you can hold a single pointed focus on something, something you really want, like a new job or a new home or whatever, a single pointed focus, and you just keep stepping into that as if it has already happened. You're already living that job, that home, that whatever. And it's the single-minded focus that brings coherence, because coherence versus incoherence is what's partly making the huge difference here. And when you get together with others and you all have the same loving intention, then that group energy is magnified. So whether you're in the same room as a handful of people, whether you're connecting online globally with thousands of people, if you all have the same loving intention, that hugely magnifies the potential for manifestation of that good thing. I mean, Lynn McTaggart's been running some really huge peace intentions and meditations in early February. So if you're not aware of those, link into those. And she's got 10 tons of evidence. There's so much evidence out there how our meditations, our group meditations work. And so if we're zigzagging, being distracted and scattered by scary things, all in what do I think of this leader and what do I think of that leader, we are significantly diluting our manifesting abilities. It's almost like you go, this may help. It's like going to a restaurant and putting in your order with the waitress to say, I'd like the soup of the day today, please. And then 5 minutes later, you call her and said, actually, I've changed my mind. I want the omelette today. And then that goes into the kitchen. And then 5 minutes later, you call her over again and say, no, actually, I'm sorry, I've changed my mind. I want to have the fish of the day today. And that order goes into the kitchen. And then 5 minutes after that, you call her over and said, no, I've actually really decided now I want to have the chicken dish today. And eventually the chef comes out of the kitchen saying, I cannot finish the cooking of any single dish for you until you focus on what you really want. I cannot finish the cooking of any single dish for you until you really decide on what you want. And that may seem like a very trivial example, but it may help us understand how this works if we zigzag, if we're scattered, if our attention is all over the place and we're not focused in living from the inside out and being very clear on our intentions and our visions for the future. Because we are creating new earth in every moment. I mean, it's already there, but we are adding bricks and mortar as we go. So I hope that's a helpful kind of example of how this works. So I just don't think I've explained it clearly enough before. Okay, let's look at the astrocartography for this new moon, because it is covering a lot of geographies. And by astrocartography, what I mean is at the moment of this full moon, if the planets were to leave shadows across particular geographies, where would those shadows fall, and which planets are leaving the shadows? So a lot of geographies. And just to say that when we go through the astrocartography, it absolutely isn't that all of these geographies come into the news at the new moon, but there's greater probability that some of them will. Okay, and this has happened. So, you just have to track these lunations and to see how powerful this can be. Okay, so the new moon, i.e. the sun and moon, which are together, the new moon, they are angular through Ireland, Portugal, East Africa, Nepal, India, China, central Mexico, US, and Canada. They are angular, i.e. they have greater potency across those geographies. Oh, and New Zealand. They're on the midheaven, the leadership, the government for New Zealand as well. At the time of this new moon, Uranus is on the midheaven, again, leadership, government, running down West Coast America, California area particularly. So is there going to be some change in leadership there? Uranus is on the IC, the land, the base of the chart in Russia, Kazakhstan, and Iran. So that could be, some kind of seismic activity. And Pluto at the time of this new moon is on the IC, the land in Brazil. It's on the midheaven, government leadership in Australia, Indonesia, and Japan. And that whole Pisces pileup of planets that we looked at, I'm leaving Sun and Moon out of it because they're slightly wide here, but Mercury, Venus, Venus is part of it, even though she's in Aries in the chart, she's being picked up in the astrocartography. So Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Neptune, North Node on the land, the base, the icy across Western Europe. That includes France, Netherlands, Switzerland, Italy, Western Scandinavia, and even some parts of Africa, actually, Algeria and Nigeria too. So as I say, not all of those geographies will come into the news, but it is probable that some of them will. So think of all that I've talked about with regard to, the more mundane expressions. We will see what happens. And really, I'd like to close now with the Sabian symbol for the new moon. As you know, with Sabian symbols, you always have to round up to the next degree. So the Sabian symbol for 10 degrees of Pisces is, and this is really interesting, an aviator pursues his journey flying through ground obscuring clouds. An aviator, i.e. a pilot, pursues his journey flying through ground obscuring clouds, i.e. you're in the clouds. That's very Piscean, actually, because Neptune is typically, Neptune's linked to clouds, actually, and fog. But if we fly above, and this comes from Dane Rudyard, brilliant astrologer, passed away quite some time ago. If we fly above the clouds, we're essentially flying above the noise of the world, of the 3D world. You can't see very clearly in the fog and the clouds of that 3D world. These are my words now, but this is coming from Dane Rudyard's interpretation. But if we move above that to our eagle's perch, let's say, to our point of divine neutrality, to our aviator point, we have the ability not only to be able to hold coherence, but to understand better what is unfolding in the world in a much more spiritual, a much greater spiritual perspective. Again, this is very Piscean. And this will help us to achieve mastery, because this is about a real shift to our transcendence, to the light body, to transcendence, to move away from the noise, away from the hubbub, beyond the confusion, the fog, the clouds. And really do consider, with all of those planets in Pisces, this is the end of the zodiac. Neptune is at the last couple of degrees of the zodiac, Pisces. And we won't have this number of planets in Pisces ever again in this particular cycle of Neptune, because the next time the Sun moves into Pisces, Neptune will have already moved into Aries in January 2026. And so this is an unusual number of planets in Pisces, really highlighting that this is the end of the old world. This is perhaps the end of lies and deceptions and illusions and veils and all of those things. And then we start to move into Aries, Neptune even, as I say, moving into zero of Aries on the 30th of March, and a much more, I think, focused, initiatory, active, and eventful period from March onwards, particularly the second half. So much more to say about that as I get to the next update. But hopefully this will help you and guide you. And as I say, I will be minimally online because I need to take a chunk of time off. It's been quite busy. God bless. Thank you for listening to the end. Have a wonderful new moon in Pisces. Don't forget to set your new intention for that. And I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.